Hi, everybody. This is Virginia Milner coming to you again for the DeKalb County Library with another jewelry making program. I have been looking for a way to tie in leather and wire for a while, and I finally found it. It's just playing around, searching pictures, putting things together, just kind of merging things together that I would see out there. And I actually saw a picture, I don't remember where I saw it, a while ago, of a necklace that I thought was really cute, and I wished I could have found it. But I just kind of played around until I got the necklace that I wanted to look sort of like the picture that I'm remembering in my head. So this is what I came up with. It's kind of interesting. I thought it was interesting. It's really, really pretty on. And it was so simple to make. It's very, very easy. And I just did it sort of like, I don't know what you call it, kind of chandelier type loops and scallops with the wire, just kind of manipulated the wire a little bit so that it looks like scallops, and these little things hanging down look like those chandelier lamps, those teardrop lamps. So I was just playing around with that, and I thought it would be such a neat project, and this is really pretty when you put it on. I did this very, very simply. I just spiraled, just did some spirals at the bottom and fed it through the beads, and then just made a loop. And I started to do that, but I thought that's so easy and simple, which is great if you want to just make a wrapped looped bead maybe, and put it through these little loops on the leather. That will come out just beautiful. But what I wanted to do was kind of take it another step. And so what we're going to do today is do some wrapped beads. So we're going to do some scrolled beads. And that's what's going to hang in our little loops. That's what we're going to do today. So we're going to do these scrolled beads. Just show you how to make the loops in the wire. I dropped it, there it went. How to make the little loops in the wire so that you have scalloped, not in the wire, in the leather so that you have scallops. And that's basically it. We have our wire wrapped beads, our scalloped leather, and it comes together to create something really, really pretty and I think quite unique. So we're going to get started. So basically the things that you need are what we normally need: round pliers, square pliers, cutters, what you find in your basic kit, a ruler, 20 gauge wire to make your wrapped bead, and I'm just using our artistic wire today. You can use artistic wire, you can use craft wire, either one is workable. I'm using just soft 20 gauge for my beads. And then for the wrapping part, on the leather, what's making my loops, I'm going to use 22 gauge wire to do the wrapping. That will do the wrapping on the front, and it's going to be what I use to make the loops in the back. I wanted to make that a little shorter, so I didn't put it through there. What I'm doing to make the loops in the back that will accommodate my clasp. And I think what I did for this one was just use a simple S-hook clasp, my favorite clasp in the world. And I might do a wrapped one this time. We'll see what time looks like by the time I get this all finished. So what we're going to do is get started. You have everything you need. I have, oh, and the beads that I'm using, the beads that I used for that one were a large 16 millimeter bead because I didn't really do anything to them. But because I'm wrapping these beads so that they end up about the same size as a 16 to 18 millimeter bead, I'm using these little 6 millimeter, let's see if I can hold it up so you can see, these little 6 millimeter square beads. 6 millimeter squares, you can use round. I'm just trying to do something a little bit different. And I'm using 1 millimeter leather cord. It's very, just very easy to manipulate, very small. The beads that we're going to be making are very lightweight, so you don't have to worry about it pulling down on your neck. And I'm using this kind of Bordeaux color, burgundy color. I don't know if you can hear that siren. We're under tornado watch. But anyway, because it goes with my beads. I thought that was really pretty. So I'm using 1 millimeter leather. For this one that has the bigger beads on it, the heavier cut glass beads, I use 2 millimeter. 2 millimeter leather. So today, 1 millimeter leather, 22 gauge wire, 20 gauge wire, round pliers, square pliers, cutters. Okay, I hear that tornado siren. I need to check it out. Okay, the tornado siren went away, so I guess we're safe. So let's get to it. The joys of virtual teaching. Anyway, so let's get to it. So now what we're going to do is start on our creation. So the first thing we're going to do is make our little beads. We're going to make our beads that we're going to dangle. So the first thing I want to do is cut my 20 gauge wire, which is what I'm going to use to make my little kind of bullseye type beads. I'm getting a lot of glare. I hope you can see it. So what I need for that, if I look at this, I can I know how much I need, but if I'm kind of trying to decide how much I need for each bead, I can look at this, and this first wrap all the way around takes 2 inches. I can measure that. It's about 2 inches on the ruler, about 1/2 inch per side, a little bit more than 1/2 inch, and each one of them is going to get progressively smaller. So I'm going to say 2 inches for each one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 loops. So the first 2 I'm going to say are 2 inches each. So 2, 4, and let's go with 6 for the third one. And then the next 2 will be 8. And then the last one is just about 1/2 inch. So about 8.5 inches. And then I need at least a good inch for my loop at the top. And we're doing a relatively simple loop at the top. We're just going to wrap it around and secure it on one of the edges of wire here, just to keep it nice and tight together. So 10 inches of wire is what I'm going to cut for that. If you feel like that might not be enough, add another couple of inches and then measure it when you're finished. When I did 12 inches, I ended up cutting off this much, almost exactly 2 inches. So I'm going to give myself 10 inches to make my first bead. Now, the other thing is you do not have to make these all the same size. You can get as creative as you want in size and shape, and it's going to come out really pretty. The consistency will be the color of the beads and the fact that I'm spiraling each one of them. But I'm going to go ahead and just be a little arty. So I'm going to give myself 10 inches. Cut that off. Grab my bead. And the first thing that I'm going to do is make a little notch on the end. So I'm going to take my pliers and just grab the tip of my wire and just give it a little bend, just a tiny little notch on the end here, so that when I slide my wire into my bead, I have a little something that will hold it. It holds it on. Not enough so that it drifts off to the side beyond the bead, but just enough to hold it in place. I'm just going to smash it down so it's nice and tight. And be careful because you don't want to grip it so tight that you break your bead. Now, the initial wrap or two is going to be the most challenging because you don't have anything really to hold on to too tightly. This bead is 6 millimeters, so it's very small. So I just have to really work with it. So what I'm going to do is wrap my wire around the circumference of the bead. And I'm going to use my pliers to hold this in place very, very carefully because I don't want to scratch my bead. I certainly don't want to break my bead. I just want to hold it in place. So I've got my first bend there in my wire. So I'm going to go around and make another bend. Still don't have anything to grip. So very carefully bend that down. Okay, now it's getting a little easier because I have something to hold on to in the wire. I can grab the bead in my wire and I can make another bend. And now I'm on the side where I originally made my that little nub that's there. So that's on the top there. So I'm going to go around, make another bend. And just be patient. It will get easier once you get past these first few loops. Okay, make another bend. Oh, look at that. Look at what I just did. That is not what I wanted, but that could work in my favor because now it's going to be really snug against my bead. Yeah, that is true. So there, now it's nice and snug. Let's wrap that again. Okay, now I have a full circle around my bead. Not only that, I have something I can hold on to. Yay! Okay, bend. Now that I have some wire to hold on to, that's great. Now you want your wire to wrap around itself. So the wire is side by side. And I also want to be careful. There's a lot of things that you want to look out for. You don't want to grip the wire so tight that you damage it. You don't want to grip your bead so tight that you damage it. You just want to be very patient and work your way around until you get to the point where it's a lot easier to hold on to and to bend. So now you can see my spiral beginning. Holding my wire, bend it. Another bend around the side, making sure that my wire is wrapping around itself and not bunching up. See that? Okay. Okay, there we go. Still wrapping. And I'm just going to keep wrapping until I basically run out of wire, except for the part that I'm going to use for my loop at the top. And now I have enough wraps that I can hold it with my fingers instead of my pliers, which is always a joy. So I'm going to keep wrapping, wrapping, wrapping. You can see the coil nicely forming. Kind of reminds me of, I don't know, who out there is old enough to remember the old original Rod Serling Twilight Zone. They had those really weird abstract pictures that would pop up and that weird music. That was so disturbing. But anyway, that's what this little thing reminds me of when I'm making it. It reminds me of the Twilight Zone. How can something so pretty be so weird? So now I am about where I want to be. I'm going to check it against my other bead that I have here, and it's pretty much the same size. Awesome. And again, they don't have to be the same size. It's up to you. Now, if I wanted to, I could kind of pull this a little bit tighter. I can squeeze these together so they're not so open if I don't want them that open. It's up to you. You can manipulate these to the shape and size that you want them to be for the most part. But now what I've done is I have a good inch expanse of wire left that I can use to make my loop. And what I want to do is bend it to the side. I want to go to the halfway point right up here at the top, because this is where I think I'm going to make my loop go, right here. So I want to bend my wire up like so, right there in the center of that little expanse of wire up here at the top. And then I'm going to make a loop. And now my loop is going to be coming towards me, I guess I should say, not side to side, because what you want to do is hang it on a piece of leather, like this. I don't know if that's clear. There we go. I want to be able to hang it on my leather like this, so that the loop needs to be going front to back, to the front and back of my bead. So I'm going to take my pliers. I've got my wire going straight up. I'm going to bend it to what I'm calling the front of my bead. Slide my pliers in until I find the place that I want, the size that I want my loop to be. I'm using 1 millimeter leather, so it does not have to be that big. So I'm going to go about halfway down my pliers, and I'm going to make a loop. And this is not going to be a wrapped loop. It's going to be a simple loop. So now I have a loop here, at least 2/3 of a loop. And what I want to do is feed the tail of this through the second loop in my bead. And that will hold it all together so that it's not able to pull apart. So what I want to do is go down here, and I want to cut off the end of my wire down just below that second ring of beads. So here's the one with the loop in it. I want to go to the next one and cut my wire off just beneath that. So there's my end of wire. And I'm going to wrap it until it's underneath the second ring of wire. So I'm going to take my pliers, I'm going to grasp onto my wire, and I'm going to put a bend in it. And the easiest way to do this is to actually hold my wire and loop it around until it's going under that second ring of wires. We'll make a nice little loop under there. So now I have a nice little loop, and I'm going to string it under that second loop of wires right there. And once I have it under there, I'm going to mash it down with my pliers. So there's my little tail, the little end of wire. And it's nicely held in place. Let's do that again. Okay, so 10 inches of wire, and it was perfect because I only cut off about ½ an inch of wire. I didn't lose too much. So I'm going to cut 10 inches of wire again. Have another bead. Again, this is 6 millimeter. Put a little notch or a little bend in my wire, just so that you can use your flat nose or your round nose, whichever works better. And I just want a tiny little notch so that when I slide my bead onto my wire, it has something to hold on to. I don't want it to extend out beyond my bead, so I'm going to clip a little tiny bit of it off. This wasn't extending out, but I really, really want it to be short. And when I cut off a little end like that, I want to turn it away from myself or turn it down into something so that it's not going to go flying across the room in my face or in somebody else's face or anything like that. So now I've got my wire on my bead, and let's start making our bends. Okay, and once you have started doing this, it'll get a little easier as you go along. It's one of those things that's practice makes perfect. So I'm grasping it with my pliers, and I'm very careful not to scratch my bead. Just want to grasp it just enough that you can hold it in place. And then I'm making a nice little spiral so that the wire wraps around itself. And just keep spiraling. And I don't want the wire to be on top of each other. I want it to actually be on the side. Each wrap should be right beside the wrap before it, so that I can build it up into a nice spiraling cage, sort of, around my bead, or a frame. That's it. It's kind of a frame around my bead. See that? Just keep going. Just keep wrapping. framing my bead. And you can, it depends on what you want. I mean, you could actually, what we usually do when we're doing this type of a spiral, I'm usually making it round, but I'm using a square bead, so I want to highlight that. So I'm actually, once I get to my corner, I'm actually bending it into a squared off corner because I really want it to be square. I don't necessarily want it to be round. It's a slightly rounded corner, but it's still going to come out looking square when I finish my frame. And now I think I'm to the point where I can actually hold it with my fingers, which is so much nicer. Okay, and keep making my little frame until the entire bead is surrounded by wire. And you can make some manipulations along the way. If you see it's getting tighter than you want it, you can kind of pull it apart a little bit. This one was a little tighter, and I think that's the way this one's going to go too, just a little bit tighter. And I really like it when I'm doing something organic like this, because I think it's so much more artistic than if I'm trying to make everything perfectly symmetrical. This is so much more fun. Okay, so I have my entire bead nicely framed. Look at how that's popping. It's kind of 3D like. See that on the side? It's kind of popping up. Neat. So now what I'm going to do is create my loop. So I've got my wire here, and I'm going to, let me see, let me count these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, good. Okay, you can make them all the same number of wraps, or you can make them fewer, you can make them more. It depends on the look that you're going for. I am not even concerned about how many wraps I have for each one, because they're all going to be different no matter what I do. And that is just fine by me. So let's finish this off. I've got my expansive wire here that I'm going to use for my loop. I'm going to go to right there at the top here in the center between the edges of my frame of my bead. I'm going to bend this. You can use your pliers if you don't want to mess up your nails. I'm going to bend my wire away from the bead until it's straight up. Then I'm going to bend my wire towards what I'm calling the front of my bead, like that. I'm going to slide my wire down my pliers until I'm at the halfway point. And then I'm going to wrap my wire around the pliers until I have a kind of a 2/3 of a loop in there. Almost, but not quite finished. And now I'm going to cut that end of wire off down just below that second ring of wire. So there's my end. I'm going to cut it right down here, just below that second ring. And there's my little tail. So I'm going to turn it away from me and point it down so that the tail goes right on the table. Okay, so now I'm going to make another little loop down here. I'm just going to make a little curve. I'm going to hold on to the loop of my frame. I'm going to make a little curve down here at the bottom so that I can poke that through that second row of wire. Just loop it, loop that end up. Take my square pliers and squeeze that end down against the frame of my wire so that it's not sticking out and ready to do damage to clothes, skin, or anything like that. Just push that down, give it a nice squish. And we're ready to roll. And a nice kind of a bail on there. Nice little loop that I'm going to use to slide through my leather. Make sure that's nicely conformed here. And then there's the end hidden right in there so that it won't do any harm to your clothes or anything. All right, so now we're ready to roll. I have 5 nice little beads all ready to go. And let's set up our cord. So how much cord do you need is the next question. It depends on how long you want it to be. So what I've done with this one, I wanted it to be right up at the neck. So what I wanted was a 16-inch drop, or a 16-inch piece. And that's going to hit me right at the neck. So I made some nets. So for each item, you're going to need some leather. So each of my loops is about 1 inch, takes about 1 inch of leather. Each of my scallops is about 1.5 inches from end to end. About 1.5 inches from end to end. I have 5 loops, each one 1 inch, so that's 5 inches. I have 2 loops in the back that I'm using for my connectors. Those are each 1 inch, so that's 2 more inches, or 7 inches. Each of my scallops is 1.5 inches, and I have 4 of them, so that's 6 inches. And then the remainder of the wire that's going around my neck is going to be 10 inches. So let's add that up. 5 loops, 5 inches. 4 scallops, 6 inches, that's 10. 2 back loops, that's 2 more inches, that's 12. And then I need enough to go around the neck. That's going to be another 10 inches. That's 22. I'm going to go through that one more time because this part across here is approximately 6 inches. I want my piece to be 16 inches, so I need 10 inches for my drop, 5 on each side to go around the neck. So that'll be my 16 inches, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 inches. And I'm giving myself an extra couple of inches because you have to have something to work with back here that extends out beyond your loop. So I've given myself 12, 24, 30 inches, which is what I did before, and I ended up cutting off exactly 7 inches, which made it 23. So I'm giving myself 30 inches again. I'm probably going to end up cutting some off, but I would rather do that than to not have enough to complete my necklace and end up having to either start over or make it into a bracelet. So I've got 30 inches of leather cord here. So the first thing I'm going to do is attach my center. My first bead in the center. It's easier for me to start in the center and work my way out than it is to try to start around the end, because this way I know exactly where my center is. I have 5 beads, so I have a center. If you have 4 beads, then you don't have a center. It just depends on how many you're using. Today we're doing 5. So what I'm going to do is make a little loop down here in the center of my cord. And then I'm going to grab some 22 gauge wire. It takes about 3 inches. I was working directly off of my spool, but it's easier for you to see if I don't have that spool flapping around. So I've just got about a foot of wire here, and I'm going to start wrapping. So the first thing I want to do, again, is find the center of my cord, make a little loop, which is basically bending it in half, and then making a loop down here. I'm going to take an inch of wire and let it extend out over my loop. Grab that, and then I'm going to start wrapping. I'm going to give myself 3 full wraps with my 22 gauge wire around the leather. The first wrap, you want to make sure it's nice and tight. So I'm going to pull that, and I can take my pliers and I can tug on it. I just want to make sure that my wire is tight, my wrap is tight, and I also want to make sure that my leather is not bunched up on top of each other. It needs to be side by side, nice and close, and side by side. So I've got 1 wrap, 1 full wrap. I'm going to go around the second time. Again, nice and close. And then around to the back, and you can see that I have 1, 2, 3. You can do 4 wraps, 5 wraps, 2 wraps. It's entirely up to you. I wouldn't go less than 2 wraps. So then I'm going to take my short edge of wire, the short edge, and I'm going to pull it through the center of my my wire tail towards what I'm referring to as the back of my cord. So I pulled it through to the back so that it's on the same side as the long end. And now I'm going to bring those 2 tails together, and I'm going to wrap. Now I could have done better with a longer tail here, but I don't have it, so I'm just going to have to deal with it. So now I'm going to take these 2 ends and I'm going to wrap them or twist them together. You don't want to wrap one around the other. You want to actually twist both of them. And I'm just going to twist it twice, so I have a nice twist here. And then I'm going to cut the wire down to where the twist ends. Just cut that off. And I'm going to take that twisted wire and I'm going to push it through in the center of my leg. So I'm going to use my pliers to curve it around until I can push it through my loop. Then once I get it in there, I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to cut it off so that the end is right in the middle of my loop. Because you don't want the end to be sticking out. You want it right kind of ensconced in between the folds of the loop. Now be very careful with your cutters. You do not want to cut your leather. That would be heartbreaking. So I'm going to turn this little tip down so that it's not facing me and won't hit me in the face when I cut it off. Snip that off. And then I'm going to take my pliers and I'm going to push that end down in between the folds of my leather. Right there in that loop. Right there in between. Squish that down. So it's just nicely hidden right in between the folds of my loop, and it won't scratch anything. So both of my ends are nicely encased. Just neaten up my rings a little bit. And there's my first loop. And now I can put my my bead on. Now I wanted to show you this a couple of ways. You can either, since we're just doing a simple loop, you can either open your loop up and slide it on. And then I'll show you another way to do it. I'm opening my loop up, and I'm going to slide it on my leather cord inside the loop. I can get it to stay there. And then I'm going to close that back up again. Insert my little loop back through the ring of my bead and close it back up. There we go. And so there's my first enclosed bead. Now I'm going to show you another way to do it. So now my next one, my first scallop is going to be about 1.5 inches from end to end. So back to my ruler, measure my 1.5 inches. There we go. And I'm going to make another scallop. I'm going to make a scallop because this will be your first one. So this is the start of my loop. Just bend it into a nice little circle. And what I'm going to do is squeeze it so I know exactly where my bead should go. Now here's the other way to attach the bead. Just put it on. Just take it, slide it over the tail. Okay, this is the front. Make sure I got it going the way I want it to go. Slide it down until it drops into my little loop. And wrap. Let's make our wrap. Let's grab my 22 gauge wire, give myself a 1-inch tail to hold on to, and start wrapping. Again, the first wrap is the more challenging one. So what you can do in that case is just create a bend. Make a bend in the wire. Then you can just slide it on and get to work. The only challenge, or the biggest challenge, I guess I should say, about having the bead on is that you have to ignore it. Make sure it stays out of your way while you are wrapping. So I got my 3 wraps here. Take my little end, my little cord end, the short end. Feed it down in between the tails of the cord. so that it meets the long end of my wire on the other side, on the back end, what I'm calling the back end. Bring the wires together, cross them over. And let's twist them around. Give it a good twist. In this case, I'm just doing 2 twists is plenty. Got that bead flopping around, causing me problems. Not really, but it just adds another little element of challenge. I'm going to give myself 2 twists. So I've got 2 twists in my wire. I'm going to cut it off right at the end of my twist. Hold on to the end so it doesn't go flying. Snip it off. Out of the way. And feed that braid down in between the loops, like we did the other one. Just twist it, feed it through the loop. And manipulate it till you get it the way you want it. So what I'm going to do is push this down, push it through there as far as I can get so I can see what I need to cut off. Okay. And now I want to clip this so that it's right in between the folds of the loop. Again, be careful with your cutters. You don't want to cut your leather. Turn it away from you. Clip it off. And push the wire down. Squeeze it together. Sorry, that was my phone. I don't know what that was about. Squeeze it. Don't want anything sticking out. Kind of neaten up your rings if you need to. Just push that one ring together. Push these down. Nice and neat. And we have our first scallop. Awesome. Cool beans, huh? Isn't that neat? That is so cool. So let's do another one. Okay. Again, 1.5 inches from end to end. 1.5 inches. Right there. That's where the beginning of my loop is going to go. Bend it into my loop. Grab my bead, slide it on. It's really raining cats and dogs out there today. Okay, slide on my bead. Oh, I really need to turn my phone off. And start a wrapping. Yes. Grab my 22 gauge wire and let's go to work. my loop, got my 1 inch to hold on to. It's really nice. I cut 12 inches of wire, and I'm already on my 3rd one. I think I'm actually going to get 4 of these done with 12 inches of 20 gauge or 22 gauge wire. That's that's very nice, because it means that the others will take less than 12 inches. And again, that first wrap is the challenge. Let's squeeze that together. I'm going to take my own advice. Create a bend, squeeze it, and I can just slide it on there. And I have a running start. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Thankfully, it is soft wire. Okay, start my wrap. Nice and tight on the first one, so the rest of it is a lot easier. Okay, and you can always hold it with your pliers. I mean, there's no reason that you have to hold it with your fingers if you don't want to. Okay, start the wrap. It's 1 loop, 2 loops. Get a little tighter. Well, it is seriously raining out there. I don't have flowers, so I don't know if we need it or not. We might. And 1 more wrap. Okay, bring my short tail through the cord ends. The short tail of my wire through the cord ends of my leather to the back. And my little loops are spread a little bit, so I'm going to take my pliers, squeeze them together so that they're a little neater, just a little closer together. Okay, I brought my short tail of wire around to where my long tail of wire is. Cross the wires over and give them a couple of twists. 1 and 2. Once that has been accomplished, cut it down to the end of the twist. I guess I should say where the twist ends, holding on to that tail so that I don't end up with wire in my face. Cut that off, put that off to the side, and let's tuck that twist through my loop. And this, I find the easiest way to do it. I don't know if I can show you. I find if I make a loop with my round pliers, that helps feed it through the loop of my cord. It's just kind of a little hack that I have. If I send it off in the direction it's supposed to go, it's a lot easier to manipulate when I have to push it down. Okay, so it's through the loop. I'm going to smash it down a little bit. It's a little bit closer. Okay, so there's my little tiny tail of the twist on the inside of my loop. Cut it off. Inside my loop, being careful of my cord. Don't want to cut that. Then I'm going to smash it down. So that it's out of the way. Nicely ensconced between sides of the loop. There we go. Ooh, look at that. That is so awesome. That is so neat. I wasn't sure how it's going to look. Isn't that awesome? Okay, I have 2 more to do. I'm going to do those off camera, and then I will come back and show you how to finish it up. Shouldn't take me more than a second. Okay, here we have it. There's our scallops. And now it's time to finish up the back. So what we want to do, because when you're making these little manipulations, then the wire is going to just naturally start to go in that direction. So we just need to manipulate the wire a little bit like I did on this side. You just need to kind of coax it in the direction that you want it to go. So we want it to go this way around our neck. So just give it a little coaxing. Just beyond the scallop. So I'll go that way. So now what we're going to do is finish it off. Now I want to make sure of my length. So that's the next thing that I would do is measure. I know this is about 6 inches across here from side to side, I believe. Let's make sure. And it's just going to be from the actual drop part. So here we go. Yep, 6 inches. Very good. From where the wires extended out. Let me pull that a little bit. 6 inches on the nose. So I want another 10 inches to give me my 16-inch drop, or my 16-inch length. So I want 5 inches on each side. So there's my 5 here. So that's where I'm going to make another loop that's going to accommodate my clasp. And I can make it a little bit shorter because my clasp, of course, is going to take up space. And I do believe I will. I'm going to take it down about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to give myself 4 3/4 of an inch. 5 will be where the loop, the actual loop is. So I'm going to fold it right there at that 5-inch mark. And I'm going to make another wrap. So what I discovered was I used that one 12-inch piece to do all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of my loops. So in order to do 2, I probably only need about 5 inches at the most. You need a little bit to be able to hold on to. So I'm going to give myself about 5 inches of wire to work with for my wraps. 3, 4, and 5. And I'm going to do this exact same thing that I did for the loops down here. Give myself about 1 inch. Extension of wire. Wrap it around with the long end. And now I'm using an S hook. So I'm just going to make a loop on both sides without any kind of a jump ring or anything, because I'm making an extra piece that's going to be my hook. And I don't have to worry about putting any kind of a ring on the other end. The ring or the loop is going to be my leather. Okay, let's feed that through my tail here of my cord. Bring that around to the back to meet the long tail of wire. Twist the two of them together. Nice and tight. Just a couple of times. And again, you're twisting, you're not wrapping one around the other, you're twisting them. Okay, let's cut that off right there at the wrap end. And let's feed my little braid or my little twist through the loop. And cut it off right there in the center. Here's my end. Let's cut it off so it's right in the middle of my loop, just like I did the others. Again, being careful not to cut my cord. There we go. Nice, neat, tidy. Push everything down. There we go. Here's my one side. Look at all of that cord I have left over that I have to cut off. It's a crying shame. Okay, 5 inches on this side, and I can just measure it against this side. So that both sides are even. Here's the head of my loop. Take the rest of my wire. Myself 1 inch or so. Wrap it around. It's so much easier to do this when I don't have that little bead flopping around in there. Okay, let's squeeze that nice and tight so it's easy to wrap. Put your ends together. And let's wrap. Okay, let's feed my little tail through. Actually, they're both short tails now because I just have a little piece of wire that I'm using. Let's push those loops together. Well, I think I need one more loop around here. I only have 2, not 3. There we go. Now, let's bring the edges together, the tails together, cross them over. Give it a twist, and now I'm gonna use my pliers because the tail is so tiny. It'll be easier to hold on to them this way. One twist, 2 twists. And cut it off. And let's feed that last little twist through the loop. So it looks a little small. I'm going to pull it down a little bit. There we go. Just feed that through my loop. And cut off that end so it will do no damage, so it will do no harm. There we go. Push it down, nice and snug. Neaten up those rings a little bit. So they're nice and snug. Okay, we are ready for our clasp. Yay! So there we go. Make sure it's going the way I want it to go. And then I can just cut off the ends here with my little clippers. Okay. Inside. Cut it off the other side. And because you have this wrapped around one leg here, one little end, it won't slide. It won't slide back and forth and it won't come off. So that is really a good thing because you wouldn't want it to come off. Wire to do what I want it to do. Go this way. I mean, not my wire, but my cord. And what you can do is kind of just roll it. So it goes the way you want. And now let's make our S-clasp. I think I'm just going to make a plain S-clasp. I was going to make one to match this. Yeah, why not? Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So I have a little 6mm square bead, and I'm going to use, I'm going to use 20 or 22 gauge. I don't want it to be too big. So I'm going to go ahead and use the 20 gauge. It's going to be a little bigger than I would normally want, but that's okay. So what I'm going to use is about 3 inches of 20 gauge wire. And I'm going to slide that through to the center. So right now, if I was going to use a 4 millimeter, I think this would be enough, but I think I need 5. Let me give myself 5 inches. 5 inches of 20 gauge wire, so I have plenty to wrap with, because I need about 1 inch on each side just for my hooks. So that'll give me 3 inches of wire to wrap. Yeah, that sounds much better. Otherwise it's going to be a little skimpy. So I've got my 5 inches of wire. I'm going to slide my bead down to the center point of my wire. I'm just eyeballing. And I'm going to bring one end of my wire over to meet the other. And then the rest of the way around my bead. So I'm going to just wrap it all the way around. And I've never done this with a square bead before, so it's going to be interesting to see how it comes out. I usually use a round one. Okay, so now I've got it down back to the same side it started on. Now I'm going to bring the other one around the same direction, not the opposite direction, but the same direction that the first one came around. It's going to feel weird because you usually do it the other way. But just believe. Bring that around until it meets the first one, and then continue beyond that first one until you get to the other side. Okay, so this is what I have. Kind of a weird, it's not kind of quite an S because this is not a round bead. And I'm going to just continue to wrap. So I'm going to wrap a little bit more around with one side and then the other side. And I'm going to squish this together a little bit so it's a little tighter. Get it a little closer to the bead. Again, I'm using a square bead instead of a round one, so it doesn't wrap around as tightly. Okay. Get a little closer if I can. Okay. And my wire is supposed to be wrapping around itself, not all bunched up, sort of like we did with our scrolls. So I'm just going to keep wrapping and wrapping until I get down to about 1 inch of wire on each side. Then I'm going to stop. And again, the wire is wrapping around itself, forming a frame around the bead, just like we did with these guys. Okay. When I get to where I have about 1 inch of wire on each side, I will stop. I'll stop that wrapping. Okay, so there we go. So what I'm going to do is kind of curve it. It's been going around this way. So I'm going to curve it around the other way on my tip here. And the same thing with this one. This one's going in this direction, and I'm going to curve it in the other direction. So it's like a little wave pattern. Now I can see that this one is a little longer than this one, so I'm going to clip it off a little bit. Okay, so now this is the way my hooks are going to go. So now I'm going to make a tiny little loop. On one end of my wire, just a tiny one. So I've got that little loop, and now I'm going to make a shepherd's hook. I'm going to slide my wire down about 2/3 of the way down my pliers, or maybe 3/4 of the way. So there's my loop. It's almost at the back, and I'm going to wrap my wire around until I have the top of my loop touching the rest of my wire. So I have a little, looks like a little swan. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to make a loop. The swirl, the loop that I'm going to make is going to be going in the opposite direction of this swirl. So I'm going to make the loop, the swirl's going up. My little loop is going to go down right there at the tip. Grab the tip of my wire with the tip of my pliers and make a tiny loop. Now normally I would only make a 3/4 loop and then squash it, but because we have these nice big loops that our hook is going to go through, we don't have to worry about it being that small. So now what I'm going to do is take my pliers, slide them down around 3/4 of the way down. I'm going to wrap my wire around until it's touching the top of my wire. So there is my clasp. Kind of a funky little clasp. Here we go. That's my clasp. That's going to go on the back here. And it's nice because you don't have to worry about whether you're right-handed or left-handed. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. Okay, let's get this to do what I want. And there we go. There's our necklace. It's so cute. Hey. All right. I love it. That is awesome. Huh. I love it. Let's see what it looks like on the mannequin. I know it's not a mannequin. It's just a it's just a display. Isn't that adorable? I can't wait to wear it. That is so cute. I love it. I'm going to have to do more wire and leather stuff. I mean, it's coming up on cooler weather, and it's nice to have something other than just metal. So we're going to be doing more wire and leather because I want to. And it's just so pretty. I like it. I like it a lot. Anyway, that's our show for today, folks. I can't even imagine how long it took me to do this because I was just piddling along, having a good time, and not really paying attention to the time. So I hope it's not too long and that it doesn't scare everybody away. But anyway, it's really worth the effort and whatever time it took me to get it done. I hope that you will do one of these and that you'll use your own imagination in regard to what you want to do it with. I mean, these are completely different. and they're both gorgeous. I love it. So I hope that you'll do something like this. And if you do, I hope that you'll share the results so that we can see how it came out, because it's a lot of fun. Anyway, I will see you next week when we will have another demonstration. And I hope that you enjoyed this one and will let me know one way or the other, whether you did or not. I have thick skin. And I need the feedback, so please let me know. And please let us know if there's anything in particular that you want for me to cover, because I will do my best to accommodate you, okay? So goodbye for now, and see you all next week.